Good afternoon all. My name is Sujata Byakriyal and I welcome you to Social Science Baha's lecture series titled Failure of Westminster Parliamentary and Presidential Systems, which executive type is suitable for Nepal. So the background is such that Nepal has witnessed extreme governmental instability, widespread corruption and exclusion while failing to develop under the Westminster-style parliamentary system, which is also known as WPS as a short form. As a result, Westminster parliamentary system is under attack in Nepal, and there are calls to adopt a presidential system. However, studies in political science have shown that all presidential systems have gone through at least one major crisis. The performance of parliamentary systems across the world, on the other hand, is mixed. While Nepalese are very familiar with the WPS or Westminster-style parliamentary system, many are rooting for the problematic presidential system, perhaps without adequate knowledge since it has never been practiced in Nepal or in the periphery, in the region. The lecture will analyze four types of executive systems: Westminster parliamentary style, presidential style, mixed presidential system, and consensus parliamentary system, based on four criteria: stability, delivery development, accountability, corruption control, and inclusion. The presentation will argue that compared to the other systems, including the winner-take-all WPS, which is again Westminster parliamentary system, the consensus model of parliamentary system may be suitable executive type for Nepal to promote stability, prosperity, control corruption, and inclusion based on the global experience as well as Nepali political culture. Given the fact that Nepal has experienced turbulence in regards to stability, I think we've had 32 governments in 34 years, since 1990. I think this is a very suitable title, and very apt given the crisis that we are facing. So for today, we have Dr. Mahendra Lawoti as the speaker. Dr. Lawoti is a professor of political science at Western Michigan University. He previously taught at the University of Pittsburgh and Wake Forest University and Western Michigan University, and published numerous books, articles, book chapters, and opinion pieces on democracy and democratization, social, ethnic, and nationalist movement and multiculturalism, political institutions, and international development. Currently, he coordinates the Front for Identity, which is a political movement whose aim is to bring together expanded but fragmented identity movements to establish a multicultural welfare state and the rule of law in Nepal. So I hand over the mic to Dr. Lawoti. Over to you, Dr. Lawoti.
Thank you. Thank you for Social Science Baha and the chair, and for all of you for coming to this presentation. So, as the abstract said, and as Sucheta said, this is what I will be discussing. So before I begin, what I'm going to do is, I'll be talking about I present four types of executives. In Nepal, largely the discussion is between what is called the presidential system versus the parliamentary system. But then there are other variants of both the system. And just to, rectify the abstract, what I say, vibrant parliamentary system is not consensus system as per se, because what I talk about today is about executive system only. Consensus political system consists of more than executive system. It is one part, but there are other elements of power sharing and so forth. So there has been an error. Deepak and I were back and forth in terms of preparing the abstract, and I think I lost track of it. I think it's partly my fault. So, but primarily I'll be talking about the two systems, Westminster parliamentary system, which all of us are familiar about because this was the system established by the 1990 Constitution. What I would like to say is the current parliamentary system is not Westminster parliamentary system per se, by the new constitution, the 2015. What we have is not Westminster parliamentary system. So, and in addition, I'll primarily discuss about presidential system just to demystify perception and about it that Nepalis tend to have about it. So then there's a semi-presidential system also. So failure of Westminster system is well established in Nepal. Widespread corruption, extreme governmental instability, lack of delivery, meaning lack of development, prosperity, and so forth. So I will not go onto it in detail. But then there is a very strong hype, because the argument has been that the parliamentary system, which is the Westminster system, has failed. So the only other alternative is the presidential system. And that is based on people's, desire or whatever, their desire that since the parliamentary system didn't work, something else will definitely work. But today what I want to expose the perils of presidential system. And when I say perils of presidential system, it is not my term. People who have studied about these executive types have talked about the perils of presidential system. So there are articles that have titles with perils of presidential system and so on and so forth. So, and why people, leaders, and even analysts in Nepal have such a high hope for presidential system? Partly because I think they are less familiar about it. Why? Because it has not been practiced in Nepal, it has not been practiced in the neighborhood, and so on. And so that's why I thought we should be more informed about how the presidential system works. So, based on what do I analyze and evaluate the system? So, 4 parameters for evaluation: stability, that is what people who advocate for presidential system say. The president will have either a 4-year or 5-year tenure, so there will be stability. So that is the expectation and assumption. Then they also said, since Westminster parliamentary system did not deliver, did not develop the country, then the presidential system would automatically do it. So again, can a president deliver as presidencies delivered elsewhere? So we'll discuss about it. Then in terms of accountability and control of corruption, for example, one of the arguments often heard is that under a presidential system, the president will hire experts as cabinet members, and as such that will lead to development of the country. So in the context of Nepali political culture, how likely would that be? Then of course in terms of inclusion, which executive type would promote inclusion. So these are the 4 parameters I would be discussing about. So first, let me just, since we have less information and knowledge about the presidential system, I'll talk about it. So all according to repeated research on the executive type, all presidential systems have witnessed at least one major crisis, all of them, all over the world. So why does that happen? So one of the reasons that happens is presidents often rule by decree because they do not have a majority in the parliament or in the legislature. Just imagine in Nepal, multi-party system. So whoever wins majority, either whoever becomes president, like KP Oli, Prachanda, Dhoka, Balen, Harka Sampang, or whoever, will not have a majority in the parliament. So if they want to push for their agenda, they have to rely on decrees. So that's what some of the presidents have tried to do around the world. And the other way is, what they do is, then they try to centralize power in the presidency and undermine the power of legislature, judiciary, and other central agencies, because they want to deliver, because they think they have a mandate to deliver. People have expectations on them, which is true. So if you don't have a majority in the parliament, what do? either rule by decree or centralized power in your office. So when that happens, then the rest of the political forces will not just keep quiet and mum. So what they do is they engage in politics. They have often impeached presidents. They have invited military interventions. And I have, in the next slide, I have a table from an article that shows those things. And if the opposition political parties cannot, do impeach or incite the militaries, then they will launch long street movements for months and months until the president is disposed. So there is no system to get rid of the president. So what do? You go out of the system. You hit the streets, and then just hitting the streets will not push the president out. So it has to be a destructive social movement, political movement, which lasts for months and months. Then finally, until the president resigns or leaves office. So just an example, Peru in November 2020. In 1 week, Peru had 3 presidents. In 1 week. In 6 months, 4 presidents. So what happened? So there was a popular president. The opposition, the collective opposition didn't like him because whatever the political reasons. So they forced him to resign or impeached. Then when the parliament did that, the president's supporters erupted in the streets. So it was so violent that whoever had been made the president had to resign. And finally the third president held the election within the next 6 months, within the 6 months. So if you count 6 months, there were 4 presidents in Peru. So within 1 week, anyone can Google Peru 3 presidents, then you'll get this news. So this is what has happened with regard to presidential systems. And even in the US, which is a more functioning, working presidential system, it has faced a civil war where more than 500,000 people have died during that. So what we see is fixed tenure in presidential system has denied change or has prevented government changes in 6 months or 4 months or whatever, 6 months, frequent government changes. But it has invited a major instability, oftentimes regime instability. When military dictatorship intervenes, military intervenes, then democracy is thrown out. So there is even a regime change. And when the president is kicked out by street movements, violent street movements and so forth, then there is, more major crises and so on. So what scholars have said is parliamentary systems, especially the Westminster system, may have governmental instability, but the presidential system has major or regime instability that are major ones. So it may not be government in every 6 months, but maybe every 2 or 3 years there is destructive movement. So this is just some examples from Central and Latin America. There's a lot of data on those countries because all the 20 countries, I think 20 countries have presidential system. So what we see is what they have this term interrupted presidencies. Presidents have been elected for a fixed tenure, but they have been impeached, thrown out, pushed out, and so on. So that's why interrupted presidencies. So presidents don't last the tenure. Many presidents have, because of the reasons I said earlier. So then you can see this in post-communist countries, African countries with presidential system, then in Asia where there were fewer presidential system, but all over the regions. So this is one constant theme, that wherever there is presidential system, then it invites major crises and so forth. So this is in terms of stability. Then what about Westminster system in terms of stability? So there are a few, Westminster Parliamentary system is problematic, but there are a few examples like the United Kingdom where it has worked in terms of stability also. So what scholars have said is all presidential systems have faced problems, major crises, but some parliamentary systems have faced problems, but others have not. So there is more chances for parliamentary system to work. And in terms of Westminster system, where does it work? Oftentimes it works on more homogeneous societies. It may not work in diverse societies, it has not worked in diverse societies, but in homogeneous societies it tends to work, and so on. So, on the other hand, in diverse societies, and especially where there is bipolar societies, there is a majority group and there are other groups. So that makes one majority group, creates a permanent majority which establishes its policies, imposes its policies permanently. Because when you have a majority ethnic or diverse ethnic group, if it always wins the parliamentary election, for example, Sri Lanka is an example, whether the opposition party or the ruling party wins, both are Sinhali parties, Sinhali dominated parties. So that means that makes Sinhali Buddhists a major permanent majority and Tamil Hindus a permanent minority. So when that happens, what do the permanent minority do? Why should you stay in the country? So they revolt, they engage in violent activities, separatist movements and so on. So the 1990, what I want to make a distinction again is, I already made it but want to repeat is, the 1990 constitution provided a Westminster parliamentary system in Nepal. The current parliamentary system is not a Westminster parliamentary system. We need to make that distinction. Both are parliamentary system, but both are not Westminster parliamentary system. And there is a difference, and we have already clearly seen the outcome. The government, since the new constitutions, have lasted at least 2 years. So earlier, under the Westminster system, government used to be thrown out, new governments used to come in every 6 months or so. So now we have at least government that lasts. So the change in the parliamentary system has made a difference. There is much to go, but there is already one can show empirical proof that it has made a difference in terms of stability. Now let us look at in terms of delivery or development or prosperity. Nepal has still not prospered. So people expectation is, they say it is, one of the reasons is the Westminster parliamentary system. And again, let's have a system that makes the country prosperous. So, but what people in Nepal realize less is, when you look at presidential system, and the presidents are always seen in the TV, news and so on, because they are head of the government, they are head of the state. So they are always in the news. And that provides a perception that the president is very strong. But in the presidential system, the parliament, the legislature is institutionally stronger than the office of the president. Individually, the president might be the most powerful person in the country, but institutionally, the legislature is more powerful than the office of the president. Why? Because the legislature makes the laws, the policies. In parliamentary system, it is, the legislatures flow from the government. Then it is sent to the parliament discusses, then they approve it. And oftentimes, whatever the government sends to the parliament gets approved. Why? Because the ruling government has a majority in the parliament, in the parliamentary system. But in presidential system, it is not the government that proposes the bill, introduces the bill. It is the legislature. The committees, then both the houses of the legislature introduce the bill and forward it to the president. The president's power is his threat to not sign it. The power of veto. The president could say, if you don't include these things, or if you are too extreme, if I don't like the bill you have proposed, then I will not sign it. That is the threat of veto, is all the president has. He or she, whoever is the president, cannot propose, or at least the bills, the policies, the laws are not proposed from the presidential system. So then, as I said earlier, in most presidential system, and including Nepal in the future, Nepal is going to have a multi-party system, whether the UML or Nepali Congress like it or not, because of the geographic diversity, because of the ethnic diversity, because of the ideological diversity Nepal has, despite the UML and Nepali Congress attempt, Nepal will continue to have multi-party system. So in such a context, most likelihood is whoever is elected the president will not, as I said earlier, enjoy a majority of support in the parliament. So that means the president, whoever is elected, will not be able to, push forward his or her agenda. So then, as I said earlier, again, what happens? Again, the president will try to rule by veto power, attempt to centralize. But the major thing is, if the president cannot push or push new bills, new laws and policies, then how can he or she deliver based on his or her mandate during the elections? He or she might have promised many things, but he or she will not enjoy majority. Then how can he or she be able to push for his or her agenda? So because of that, the presidential system has not performed. And in the next slide, I have some examples, prominent examples from the US. So on the other hand, the parliamentary system is called a fuse system. Why? Because to elect a prime minister, you need a majority, single party majority or a coalition majority in the parliament. And then you elect the president, then so what that means is, then in addition to the government, sending the bills, you have a majority in the parliament. So the executive and the parliament work together in a parliamentary system. It is not so in the presidential system. So if a prime minister, either a single party prime minister or coalition prime minister, does his or her duty well, they can deliver better. The parliamentary system can facilitate better delivery than in a presidential system. Presidential system by the institution itself restricts the role of what the president can do. And I think this will be more clear if we look at some prominent examples from the US about whom we know some example. So just an example. Everybody knows about Trump's first term. So he won election on his rhetoric of building, his major rhetoric was building a wall along the Mexican border. Did he succeed? He did not. It was largely failed. It is not only Trump. Look at Obama before him. Obama's major agenda, and like many other democratic country president before him also, the major agenda has been universal health care, which the US doesn't have. US is the only industrialized country that doesn't have universal health care. So the Democrats have been trying to have a universal health care. Obama did his best, tried his best, used all the tricks in his hat, but he could not. He extended the healthcare system to, I think, 10 million or some people, but even now, I think around 25 million people in the US don't have healthcare, access to healthcare and so forth, insurance and so forth. Then Biden, his major agenda was to work for the environment, and he tried to introduce bills, or he urged the legislators to bring about major environmental bills, and he also didn't succeed. Why? Because of the reasons we discussed. And just to remind you, US is a two-party system. It's not a multi-party system. So even in a two-party system, even when the president sometimes have a majority both in the Senate and the lower house, the presidents have not been able to deliver. Even when they won political, they have the party with majorities in both the houses also. So as a result, this example shows that even a successful, I think the US is the most successful presidential system for different cultural factors and so on. Even in such countries, the presidents have not been able to deliver on their major agenda. So in this backdrop, I think in Nepal, where there will be a multi-party system and so forth and so on, I don't think presidential system will be able to deliver. So then, in the US, if you recall, sometimes there's government gridlock and so on and so forth. I think such problems Nepal will encounter more of such problems and so on. So in US, doesn't presidents have have all the presidents failed? People who study the American presidential system, what they have said is occasionally there is a watershed president who seems to deliver. For example, the last watershed president is often termed called Reagan as the last watershed president, who made major changes, major reforms. And why do watershed presidents, make major reforms? They have a majority in both the houses, the public opinion supports it, and they have the power of persuasion. In the US, when they talk about the presidential power, there is a very famous saying that one of the power of the president is power to persuade. If the president is able to persuade the public, the legislature, then he can have the legislature bring up bills that he wants, and then he can make the changes, make the reforms. Otherwise, they have not been able to do that. So based on that, when even a president in a two-party system cannot deliver, I have very, very serious, doubt whether in countries like Nepal, based on experience in the rest of the presidential system, can deliver. So the third criteria or parameter, abuse of power, corruption. So again, just to repeat, members of legislature make policies and laws in presidential system. So members of parliament are really powerful in presidential system because they are the ones who make laws. So in Nepal, one expectation or one desire is that let the current parliamentarians, they just try to become ministers, let them only make laws. But what the people in Nepal forget is, when the parliamentarians make laws, that means that they will be powerful. They decide which laws will be in place. So what that means is, then they are prone to bribery, lobbying, and so on. Given the context of political culture in Nepal, whoever enjoys whatever power, there is a tendency to abuse it, engage in corruption, take bribes, and so forth. Then my sense is, if the parliamentarians under a presidential system become powerful, there will be widespread bribery and corruption. And that is a factor in the US also. In the US, one of the problems is the lobbying. And lobbying means corporations and so on, they have a permanent office in Washington, DC, whose job is to influence the parliamentarians. But in the US, there's strong anti-corruption laws and rule of law and so on. So if the parliamentarians just, break laws in small ways also, they are prosecuted. So that way there is some control. But in Nepal, where there is, no control, rule of law is absent and so on, I think more power to the parliamentarians would probably end up more bribery and abuse of power and making laws as per the requirement, as per the desire, as per the need of the traders, the business people, the powerful corporations and so on. I think that's most likely. So then another expectations about presidential system is, as I mentioned earlier, people say the president will be able to, the current, in the parliamentary system, the people have invested heavily in the elections, so they have to recoup it, so they try to become ministers, and then they engage in corruption to recoup the investment from the investment in election. So then the solution provided in Nepal is, if we have a presidential system, he or she will recruit experts as cabinet members and other central government employees and so on. and that will lead to delivery. But if you look at the Nepali political culture, especially among the political elite, what we see is political elite, top political leaders have not, recruited experts in anything. They have either recruited family members or loyalists. So my own sense is, I think if we had a presidential system in Nepal, Arju Dhoka would have been minister long time back, because all that would have been necessary is just to appoint her a minister. Now she has to win an election, or she has to be appointed, selected as a PR legislature. So there is a couple of hurdles along the way. So Arju is just a prominent example, but just look at Prasanda and his recruitment of family members. Look at KP Woli. Look at most, I won't say all, many of the top political leaders. Whom have they recruited? Have they recruited even experts from their own political parties? No. They have recruited their loyalists or family members. So in a presidential system, they'll have a free reign. They can appoint them in cabinet members also, as cabinet members also. So I think we should look at the political culture of Nepal as well. So what is the solution? The solution is to make elections less expensive. So and there are ways and methods of that. Many countries have done that. Nepal can do it, but choosing a presidential system or a parliamentary system is not the way. I think if we go the presidential system based on the Nepali political culture, I think there will be more widespread corruption at the legislature level, at other levels also, but definitely at the legislature level and at the presidential level in terms of appointing loyalists, family members, and so on, because that is the culture. So corruption is a different issue, and that can be dealt differently. So I'll just divert it to the accountability issue, one slide. So just to make, there are other ways to make elections more free and elected leaders and government leaders more accountable. So accountable. So just one slide on it. This goes beyond the executive system. Because people have expectations in the executive system, my argument is it is a wrong expectations. If you want to make the state leaders accountable, you have to go a different route. And in accountability studies, there are two types of accountability discussed. One is the vertical accountability, the elections. So people, by not voting again for the representative they do not like, you can get rid of the people who have abused power, who have not met their expectations, and so on. So that is a vertical accountability. The problem with vertical accountability is you can throw out the leaders you do not like only after 4 or 5 years, when the next election occurs. So in between the elections, can the representative, can they, power abuse, engage in corruption, do whatever they like? So what do you do in between the elections? So vertical accountability by elections can work during elections, but it does not work in between elections. And in between elections, media is also another part of vertical accountability, can expose irregularity, power abuse, and corruption, but media cannot control it. It can only expose it. Then there are social movements also sometimes can hold government accountable, but social movements are very difficult to launch and sustain. So it is easy to say let's have a social movement, but it comes maybe in a generation, maybe in a decade, and so on. So it can be a tool of controlling corruption, but it's not an everyday tool that one has. So then what is the solution? So what the solution is, what political scientists have said is you need to have effective horizontal accountability mechanism to control corruption and power abuse in between elections. So what is horizontal accountability? It is powerful and independent central agencies. So it is at the central, so the government is also at the central, so that's why horizontal. So horizontal accountability, the idea is supposed to each other, different agencies will hold each other accountable. So for example, the anti-corruption agency in Nepal, it is a horizontal accountability mechanism in facade only, because it doesn't have power, it is not independent. So what is the need is to make agencies like anti-corruption agencies powerful, so they have enough power to prosecute the prime ministers, former prime ministers. Then they have to be made independent in terms of appointment, in terms of staffing, in terms of budgetary control. So the government should not control them through budgeting and staffing and so on. So their recruitment, appointment system should also be independent. Currently what we have is, through appointment also the major political parties control them, so they are not independent. They do not have power because whatever the cabinet decides is beyond their purview. And then in terms of staffing and budgeting also, the executive controls it or can influence it. So in Nepal, we do not have effective horizontal accountability mechanism. We have some, facade, like what we could say, dekhone daat ra chapane daat. We have teeth that, can be seen, but we do not chew. So we need a chewing teeth that is powerful and that is independent so that it can do its job. So there is a different way. So for example, controlling corruption or muscle money power during elections. If we make an election commission that is powerful and that is independent, not controlled or influenced by major political parties, then it can come up with ways to reduce election expenses and so on. It can. They have been done in other countries, so it can be done in Nepal. And there will always be money influence and so on. But in Nepal, it is openly whoever engages in corruption and abuses power and collects money, they can influence. So at least there will be some control through independent and powerful election commission, which does not exist in Nepal. So my last slide is now. The fourth criteria is inclusion. So in terms of inclusion, again here parliamentary system, both parliamentary system could be better. Presidential system is a one-person cabinet. What that means is, you have a president, the president appoints cabinet ministers whose function is to advise. So in parliamentary system, what happens is the parliament formally has to vote and decide on an issue. The prime minister oftentimes, is more influential. Whatever the prime minister, pushes, oftentimes will be approved by a majority in parliamentary system, cabinet. But there is a formal mechanism requirement of voting. In presidential system, what the president does is, he will seek advice from different cabinet ministers. The concerned cabinet ministers, his other advisors, then ultimately it is the president that decides. The majority could be the other way, it doesn't matter. Ultimately the president decides. That is the way things work in presidential system. So that's why it's a one-person cabinet versus collegial cabinet in a parliamentary system. So what that means is then, in collegial cabinet, especially if there is a coalition government, then all the cabinet members, they can voice their, agenda, they can, the perspective, then there will be deliberation, and the Prime Minister has to listen to some of these concerns, because ultimately there will be a vote in the cabinet. So that will make it more inclusive of different perspectives, different agendas and so on, but that does not happen in a presidential system. And further, parliamentary system provides, especially in a multi-party system, for coalition governments. That means different perspectives, different agendas will have to be addressed, can be addressed. So it could be more inclusive. Then another way presidential system is exclusionary is presidential system. Another way the presidential system is exclusionary is because it pushes for a two-party system. So what it means is, in the presidential system, you vote for one person, for president, for one office. So what happens is, most of the time, the candidate of the major two parties win. Not always, but oftentimes. So what that means is, people in the middle, they will either vote for party A candidate or party B candidate, and not party C or party D. Why? Because the chances for candidates of smaller parties to win the presidential system is less. So what that will do is then make the people in the middle either go to party A or go to party B. So if you vote repeatedly for the likely candidate to win, then slowly you identify with either one of the two major political parties. So in that sense, other things remaining constant, the executive presidential system pushes for a two-party system. So what that means, in a country like Nepal, plurality in terms of geography, ethnicity, ideology, and so on, that means different smaller views, smaller political parties will have a difficult time to win or the political parties to emerge, let alone win the election. Just imagine if there is a Dalit candidate for a president. Can you imagine a Dalit? I don't imagine a Dalit candidate winning a presidential system for the next at least couple of decades, at least 2-3 decades, if the current system of attitudes remain among a large part of the Nepali society. And similarly, like new forces like the environmental parties, green parties, and so on and so forth will have also less chances because of the presidential system. There are other factors also. Other factors will also, may push for a multi-party system, but if you consider the presidential system alone, it will push the country towards a two-party system, as it has been. So what is the solution, or what is a better way? So what I call vibrant parliamentary system. So the current parliamentary system has element of that vibrant parliamentary system. This vibrant, I use the term vibrant because there are researches that have shown that strong parliament, whether in presidential system or parliamentary system, are the system that perform and that deliver. So, and why does a strong parliament work? Because it's a vibrant, I thought the vibrant term will represent it. So first let's discuss about stability. We have constructive vote of no confidence in Nepal. You cannot have no confidence motion till 2 years. So for till 2 years, there is likelihood that the cabinet will last. So as I said earlier, already in Nepal, we have seen more stability, cabinet government stability than before. And I think the current challenge in the current government is that if a coalition partner withdraws support to the Prime Minister, then the Prime Minister has to demonstrate the majority. I think if we also delete that article and say that once you support a Prime Minister, then you have to support it for 2 years, like no constructive vote of confidence, I think it will be more stable. The chances of throwing out the Prime Minister will be less, so there is one option. Then in this kind of vibrant parliamentary system, the committees chairpersons are distributed proportionally among the parties in the parliament. I think that is happening in Nepal. So why it is important is, in Westminster Parliamentary system, except the Accounts Committee, all the committees were chaired by the ruling party. So the incentive of the ruling party chairpersons is not to embarrass and expose their own government. But whereas if there is, parliamentary committees are also headed by opposition political parties, it is in the interest to expose the wrongdoings of governments. So that will make it more accountable and so on. Then the thing that is lacking in Nepal is that in countries like Germany, where this Germany and other Western European model, they have a very high number of private bills. In Nepal, I think in the previous Westminster system, there were 3 private bills in the 3 parliaments, so almost negligible. I think currently no private bills have been passed under the new regime. But in countries like Germany, for example, 20 to 25% of bills are private. And why that is important for making government work? Because the government may not be interested to introduce anti-corruption laws, but the private members will be interested. As political parliament members, small political parties will be interested. So then they can introduce private bills. And in why the private bills get passed in this types of parliamentary system? Because the whip restriction is lessened. Whip is imposed only in major issues like no concurrent motion, budgetary issues and other issues. In other things, members of parliament are more free to vote based on their conscience. So in such cases, there will be more private bills, meaning even if the government is not interested to introduce certain bills, members of parliament can initiate pro-people reforms and bills and so on. So then, as I said earlier, parliamentary system are fused. So as a result, the cabinet can deliver more because the cabinet can introduce bills and it has a majority in the parliament, so they can do what they want. So based on that, what I have argued and what research in these systems have shown is based on stability, performance, delivery, accountability, control of corruption and inclusion. In all these 4 parameters, the vibrant parliamentary system performs better. It is not a perfect system, but it is better than Westminster system that has failed in Nepal, and it is better than presidential system that has failed all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawoti. Before I open the floor for discussion, I have one question that I'm hoping will set the mood. It's rather a philosophical question. So, after hearing you out, I feel that there's a tussle between, what we call order in political philosophy, which can also be used synonymously with stability, and freedom, which can again be used synonymously with fairness and justice. So, this tussle between order and freedom, and the fact that Nepal, as majority of the economists say, that Nepal just has 20 years window to prosperity. What should we prioritize in Nepal? Should we prioritize stability, order, or should we prioritize freedom, justice? So with that, I open the floor for discussion. Any questions? Or if Dr. Lawoti wants to answer this question first, you can go ahead. Any questions? Okay, I guess the audience wants some time. So if we can go ahead and answer this question, then we'll go to the audience later.
2 points with regard to this question. One is, this question can be answered, without discussing the presidential or parliamentary system. This debate exists in both, could exist in both the systems. But I think even if you prefer for the order, meaning the rule of law, let's forget for the time being justice and fairness and freedom. Even if you want to prefer for order, that means you need to have a rule of law. You need to have a rule of law. And as I said earlier, the presidential system institutionally incentivizes the presidents to not follow the law. So he or she will, because institutionally he or she doesn't have the power to deliver, but they have a mandate to deliver. So what do? You break the law. So they will start, I mean, as I say, rule by decree, undermining what often Latin America is a very, I mean, good example for these studies. In Latin America, what the presidents have said is, like what they have done is, they are elected, they try to, I mean, introduce their agenda, but they don't have the majority in the House. So they try their best, the parliament blocks them. So then what do they do? What are the options? They go to the people. They have said, look people, I mean, you guys have elected me, but these parliamentarians who are elected from small constituencies, they are blocking me. So they are not allowing me to deliver, to meet your expectations. So give me power. So then they'll introduce referendum on different issues and so on. Then the president has a popular support base. So that's why he or she won. So then the referendums will begin to, I mean, undermine the judiciary, the central agencies, and centralized power in the presidential system and so forth. So there is, I mean, the incentive for in presidential system is to not follow the rule of law by the president. On the other hand, especially in the vibrant accountability system, where the committee's chairs are headed by members of different political parties represented in the parliament, then the chairs of the opposition parties, those who are not in the government, it is in their incentives to hold the government accountable. Or if they not follow the rule of law and so on, then they'll expose it, they'll try to hold them accountable and so on. So if we define order in terms of rule of law, then the strong parliamentary system, which I call vibrant in this presentation, will be in better place to facilitate or encourage or even maintain rule of law than other, or especially the presidential system.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawoti. I see one hand. Yes, Shabash.
Thank you, Dr. Lawoti, for your wonderful presentation. I just have two questions. One is that I'm not still clear that how a presidential system would lead automatically to a two-party system, which you mentioned. Like you gave examples, but still, I did not feel like how it would happen. So that's my first question. And the second question is, like listening to your parliamentary versus presidential system, I'm intrigued by this French example. Like they have the president and they have the prime minister also. I mean, what's your take on that? Thank you.
Any more?
Any other questions? We can take 2 or 3. Yes.
अघि डक्टर साहबले एउटा भन्नुभएको थियो मोर पावर टु एमपिज अर एमपिज भनेको चाहिँ मोर करप्सन भनेर होइन त्यो चाहिँ प्रेसिडेन्सियल सिस्टम अन्तर्गतको लेजिस्लेचरको कुरा गर्नुभएको हो कि पार्लियामेन्ट्री सिस्टम अन्तर्गतको चाहिँ विधायिकाको कुरा गर्नुभएको त्यो एउटा प्रश्न भयो होइन त्यसपछि अर्को प्रश्न पनि भयो
अरु कुनै प्रश्न एनी अदर क्वेशन्स बस दुईटा प्रश्नको आन्सर
With regard to two-party system, the presidential system will not push the party system to a two-party system. But if you forget about all other factors, there will be multiple factors, but if you forget about all other factors and look only at the influence of presidential system, then as I said earlier, during most of the elections, candidate of the major parties will win, they will be the competitors. Then in all societies, polities, there are always people in the middle, and so on. So for example, there will be some environmental people who prefer environment and so on in the US. Then there are people, libertarians, who prefer more freedom in the US. Both political parties have candidates in the US. But what happens is, since either Republican or Democrat presidents only win, some of the libertarians begin to vote for Republicans who are closer to them. Some of the environmentalist people begin to vote for Democratic parties because if they vote for the Green Party candidates, they'll never win. So as a result, slowly, people who would otherwise, so for example, in Germany, there is a vibrant Green Party. Why? Because it has a proportional electoral system. So, and once some members of parliaments are elected, then the Green voters remain with them because they know they can elect. So in that sense, Germany has a parliamentary system and this vibrant type of parliamentary system. So in that sense, not automatically, but the presidential system will push towards a two-party system. There are other factors also, but if we look at just the executive system, it will do that. Then I think you had two questions. No? Then about the mixed system, no? Yeah. The French system. I wanted to include that also one slide. The challenge of the mixed system is what happens is when the president's party wins the parliamentary elections also, then the prime minister, the government and the presidents are aligned. So in that sense, the president becomes more powerful, so they have one way of governing. But oftentimes, president is from one party, so in one election, one could have a situation where the president and the prime minister is from the same party and the parliament is, majority is from the same party. So then you have one way of operating, one way of political operation and culture and norms. Then in the next elections, you have one president who doesn't enjoy, parliamentary majority. That's why prime minister is from another political party. Then in such cases, what scholars have written about it, it creates confusion among the political parties and among the people, what to expect and how to go about things. So that, because of that, a famous political scientist advocated for a mixed system because he liked the French system. But despite that, the mixed system has not taken roots. Others have not because of this. It tends to create confusion and leads to issues and so on. Now, the second question from the gentleman was what was it was about.
अघि कुरा गर्नुभएको थियो सांसदहरूले चाहिँ बढी पावर भयो भने मोर पावर बुझ्नुभयो.
Yeah, thank you. Because I wanted to add something else in the earlier presentation, but I missed it. So, in a parliamentary system, the parliamentarians are not powerful. Why? Because the bills, the laws, policies come from the government. The government with the bureaucrats and so on, they draft the bills, then they send it to the House. The House members, they can deliberate, they can raise issues and so on, but largely because in the parliament there are junior members of parliament, so whatever the political party leaders, senior leaders who have oftentimes joined the government want, they support. So in that sense, it is in the presidential system because now the parliament is the place where the bills and policies are origin. It's where the bills come from. So that gives them the power. So that's why the parliament members are more powerful in the presidential system because they make the laws, they introduce the bills. So now what I skipped earlier and now want to repeat is why this is significant is if you make a strong parliamentary system where the committees are strong, then they do not abuse power, they cannot because they don't have power, but they only have power to hold the ruling party accountable, expose the misdeed. So for example, there is a parliamentary, let's say environmental parliamentary committee, now which is headed by an opposition member of parliament. If that is the case, then it is in the interest of the parliamentary chair to expose the wrongdoing of the environmental minister, because they are in the different camps, no? So if you happen to be in the same, if the ruling party in Westminster Parliamentary system, except the Accounts Committee, all the committees were used to be headed by the ruling party. So it is not their interest to expose and embarrass the government. So they will hold the government less accountable. During the Westminster Parliamentary system, the only functioning parliamentary committee was the Accounts Committee, because by norms it had to be given to the opposition party during the Westminster earlier phase. So by in a strong parliamentary system, elements of which is parliamentary committees are headed by oppositions as well. So the parliamentary members, they don't have power to abuse, but they have the power to hold ruling party accountable. So the positive power, if you would. So if somebody abuses power, you expose them. But you want to take bribe, nobody will care. Most corporations will not care, because you cannot origin a bill, you cannot write a bill. So you don't have a power. The government writes the bill. So in that sense, I think that's an additional advantage of strong parliamentary committee system.
Thank you, Dr. Lawoti, for your presentation. You just mentioned about corruption. So I wanted to ask how we are thinking about corruption under cabinet appointed under presidential system and parliamentary system, because the only difference that I see in the current context of Nepal is, like, for a parliamentarian right now in our current context, they just have to get elected before they hold power. But the system is such that they are ultimately going to compensate themselves, like they are going to make the profit that they are going to just get the cost of their election through actually using the power that they get through their appointment, right? So if the existing system, for me, at least in the short term, what I don't see happening is the system itself, the transition from from presidential system to parliamentary system might not really change the context of how corruption works unless the people remain the same, because as long as the same people are in power, as long as the same bureaucrats who actually hold the authority and experience remain, there is very less possibility for a new generation or somebody from a very different value system actually come and reinforce what they've actually promised to the public before appointment. So I just like wondering how we are thinking about corruption, and if the transition of different from one system to another system actually is going to make a difference in how corruption works, or like to actually stop corruption in the country in the short term.
So first issue is, as I showed a separate slide, there are different ways to control corruption. So the executive system is also a factor, but you have to go beyond that to control corruption. But coming back to the executive system, so let's say parliament members under presidential system and parliamentary system, both have invested money to get elected, so both want to recoup their investment. There will be more chances of power abuse and corruption in presidential system, because the members of parliament can make bills, introduce bills, write bills, so they are more powerful. So more power means there is more power to engage in corruption. Whereas in parliamentary system, even if they want to engage in corruption, they will not be able to engage as much corruption as in a member in presidential system. So now we are assuming both members of parliament in both systems want to engage in corruption. May not. But if we assume that both members of parliament under both systems want to abuse power and gain benefit, personal benefit, engage in corruption, members under presidential power can do more because they have more power. Whereas members under parliamentary system, even if they want to, they are less able to do it because they don't have the power. So that's why my argument is under presidential system you might have more corruption under the context, under the political cultural context. But again, to control corruption, you need to go beyond. I mean, these two systems make a difference, but that alone will not solve the corruption problem. You need to address something else.
Any other question? Okay. If the audience doesn't have any, I have one, and which I think, I mean, for me it's extremely interesting. So they, presidential system is all about this single countrywide constituency, and the candidate somehow tends to become or get bigger than the political party. So given the context of Nepal, where the toxicity of political parties have increased so much, and where there's extreme politicization of every aspect of state and public sphere, don't you think that's probably, I mean, I'm not, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, but don't you think that's good if that happens? I mean, I completely agree with you, but just playing devil's advocate.
So, I guess, the issues with the current political parties in terms of their lack of responsiveness to the public, ignorance of public opinion, engaging in open and public institutionalized corruption without any embarrassment. They think that they can do whatever they want. And those are issues, and I think those need to be addressed. But compared to that, and those needs to be reformed. But if you have a personality-based system, then it could create more problems, because persons are not constrained by the norms. Even in UML, even in Congress, they might be corrupt and so on. They have some norms. But if you happen to elect a person, an individual, who is not constrained at all by any political norms, political cadre base and so forth, he or she might, chances are both, but he or she might deliver well, but there is equal, and I would say more, chances that they will become disasters, more so, because you are relying on an individual unconstrained by norms, structures and so forth. And since you raised this issue, I'll slightly divert. And what scholars have argued is, one of the reasons in presidential system, when popular persons get elected, I think Fujimori in Peru, some people may remember, the challenges for such popular but not political party based or established political based party candidate is, they don't have the connections within the parliament to advocate, bargain, get support for the bills they want. So, because a lot of this, a lot of things in politics and elsewhere also is whom you know, what are your relationship, and based on that whether you can approach other people to sit down and negotiate and discuss whether you have trust in them and so forth. So in popular, elected leaders, they don't have those connections, they don't have those networks, they don't have those trust. They have not worked with the existing within the existing political system. So that creates oftentimes more challenges for them to deliver.
So if I have the permission from the organizers to end it, because I think we've crossed the time limit, half an hour for the discussion. So is it okay if I can go? Thank you so much, Dr. Lawoti, for this really, knowledgeable, very informative discussion. So what I derived out of it is that for any democratic system, be it parliamentary or presidential system, to actually be successful, I think we need certain prerequisites. Given the fact that we're in a country like Nepal, I think the first and foremost prerequisite that comes to my mind is how we are constituted as citizenry and what our duties are. So a majority of the time we talk about our rights. What we fail to talk about is our duty towards the state. And in a democratic system, citizens, we have to be extremely aware of our duties towards our state and how we need to own the public space. Not only that, I think we need to understand that there is such a thing known as the supremacy of the rule of law. And I don't know if we really realize that or not, because majority of the time we ourselves don't comply with this notion of the supremacy of the rule of law. So I think that really hampers this democratic system of governance, regardless of what it is. That's what I believe. Another thing is that I think we fail to understand that we operate in this principal-agent theory, where we're the principal and the agents are our representatives. We believe, like the minute they get elected, we have this extremely servile attitude where we believe that they are the masters and we are the servants. It's exactly opposite to what we should believe as to how we're still sovereign, we're the principals, and they better do what we wish them to do. So I think that lack of realization as far as we as citizenry is concerned, I think that is detrimental to making a system successful or not. The third, and I think Dai you've repeated it time and again as to how important a very neutral, merit-based administrative state is. So the machinery that actually works as the cornerstone of democratic polity, if that is inundated with nepotism and patronage and lack of merit, I think that does not hold the political system as it should. So I think the prerequisites that should be there, I think that is where we lack. And I do agree that parliamentary system, especially in a country like ours, where pluralism is very evident, I think we really don't have an option, and that parliamentary system is the way to go, and I completely agree with that. So these are my thoughts, and so with that, I really thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to have this discourse, and I thank the audience for being extremely attentive and very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is our jobs. I contribution.